What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Damage Report with me, Francesca Fiorentini. That's right, I have ousted little Johnny yada yada yada. Just kept on yada yadaing his mouth, and that's what you get. All right, you get taken over. So I am, the Mike Pence is here, waiting in the wings. I'm taking over for a few days this week. Super excited to be here, and also welcoming to the program co-host of the podcast Hysteria, Erin Ryan is here with me. Erin, how are you?
I'm doing great. Ready to talk about some really fun, exciting stuff.
Fun, exciting stuff. We got banks going under. Texas is just a big wasteland of terrible policy ideas. And then there's an ivermectin influencer we're gonna have to talk about in the aftermath, as well as a new bill from, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene to protect the children. Yes, I mean, honestly, who would let that woman within on it like a few blocks of your child? We're just turning the other direction if you see her coming. So if you're here, make sure you're liking and sharing that stream for us. Make sure you keep the love coming. We'll be reading comments throughout this hour and change. But for now, let's get in to the big news here.
The federal government is scrambling to contain the fallout over the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, the largest US bank to fail since the 2008 financial crisis, the second biggest bank to collapse in US history. Silicon Valley Bank primarily catered to startups and technology companies, but its demise began Wednesday after concern over its cash reserves sparked a bank run by its clients. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation has taken control of the bank and its billions of dollars in deposits, the vast majority of which is not insured.
Well, it's deja vu in American finance. Here we go again, maybe, although we'll see how much bleeding there will be. That is Silicon Valley Bank that ran itself into the ground in 24 hours, which has got to be a record. It went from being solvent, stable, super fine, to completely closed, no money, you can't get anything out of it. So this is, why did this happen? In a series of risk management oversights, which I love that speak, macroeconomic factors, and the good old fashioned rumor mill, Silicon Valley Bank went through a liquidity crisis, causing a bank run on their deposits. So no more cash in the bank, no more money in hand. People go and take out all their funds, and the last person to get there is a rotten egg. I mean, that's what I'm understanding about this. So the stock crashed 60% through Thursday and then was halted Friday in pre-marketing trading after falling another 69%. By midday Friday, the regulators had closed SVB down and they had officially collapsed. So it seems like, and can I blame crypto for this? But this is part of what happened. They were facing $80 billion of their assets being held in securities, which have fallen in value. They've been looking to raise cash. This made markets a little nervous, but it went into overdrive when they announced a sale of stock at a loss of 1.8 billion. That came just days after crypto-focused bank Silvergate, there it is, failed, and the announcement was made with little attempt at calming investors. So that created that run on stock, people getting very, very nervous about the money that they had there. So just a little bit of background before I get comment. What is SVB? What did they do? So effectively, it was a bank that made short-term loans to new startups that were like, hey, I have an app for aggregating other apps. Sure, like, as my friend Nato Green, comedian, says, I have a Shazam for soup. Whatever idea you have, I need money for this. And so new companies and founders attached to them are seen as rightly pretty risky from a banking point of view, meaning these are all ventures that cannot get funds elsewhere, which makes many big banks wary of offering them access to banking. Enter Silicon Valley Bank, created to fix this problem. It meant their client base was very concentrated. Their cash deposits were less sticky than a traditional bank, i.e. fewer regulations, it seems. And that's because startups receive funding in order to spend it. A new company might receive 10 million from an angel investor or VC. This gets deposited into a new account with SVB, and then it is withdrawn over the next year or two in order to fund the business growth. In other, compare that to normal banks where you put it there, it sits for a long time. It's not sort of immediately used to then sort of help a business grow. That being said, it seems like they're running short on even money to pay payroll, and a lot of folks who work in companies that have a lot of money in SVB. So that's a lot coming at you. But Erin, what do you understand of this bank and what happened? And if we could have seen this coming, which we'll get into a little bit.
Okay, so the first that I'd ever heard of it was when it collapsed. I was like, oh, well, that bank existed. But then the more I read about it, the more I kind of started to understand the importance of Silicon Valley Bank in the tech industry, specifically the West Coast based tech industry. A lot of venture capital firms bank with them. Peter Thiel's venture capital firm, among others. I think it's really important to talk a little bit about, tech kind of runs on vibes. It's a vibes-based industry, right? And so, a lot of it is just a lot of the success of an app is hype, right? A lot of places get funding because of hype. So that's kind of how this kind of run on the bank functioned. It was a hype run. On one hand, SVB was losing deposits. It was losing money because tech companies weren't taking in as much over the last couple of years. That's kind of been cooling off a little bit. And also rising interest rates meant that bonds that they'd purchased were worth less.
Right.
So they already don't have very much cash on hand. Their their assets are losing value, but they weren't about to crash. They were not at any danger of collapse until certain big players in the VC world started quietly telling everybody they did business with to start taking money out of that bank. And not just take all that's over 250,000. No, take all your money out of that bank. And that person was, Peter Thiel has been mentioned a lot in the news as a person who has been, who kind of helped instigate a lot of withdrawals from the bank on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of last week. So I think that's something that we really need to talk about a little bit too. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of in the news. We're seeing a lot of right wingers saying that this is a woke bank and it died because of wokeness. But yes. Anytime you hear that person is really running interference with. They're running interference for the person and people who are actually behind the run on the bank. It wasn't wokeness. It was literally some really rich guys telling their really rich friends to take all their money out of SVB.
Yeah, exactly. If Peter Thiel, if anyone says it's a woke bank, they get money from Peter Thiel, right? How much money can you get? And we'll get into the right wing reaction, but I think it's really important. Exactly what you said. Tech industry runs on vibes. I would argue that the entire stock market sadly runs on vibes. And everyone freaks out when they hear a little whisper or a rumor or a thing, and someone who's got more money than they do, oh, they're doing a thing, so I'm gonna go there. As someone honestly who got their money in a small bank, in a credit union, excuse me, that's a word, there it is. Yes. Like I said, small, in a small credit union in the Bay Area, that's very concerning for me because the question is this gonna bleed out to other banks, even other small banks where people are not necessarily in the tech world, but just are sort of average, folks who have a little bit of cash. And yes, there are average people who have a little bit of cash who did have money in SVB. So their money is being protected by the government. So let's get into it. The Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department said they're gonna make additional funding available to ensure all these Silicon Valley Bank deposits, both insured and uninsured, will be paid in full. The statement includes this line: after receiving a recommendation from the boards of the FDIC and the Federal Reserve and consulting with the president, Secretary Janet Yellen approved actions enabling the FDIC to complete its resolution of Silicon Valley Bank, Santa Clara, California, in a manner that fully protects all depositors. Depositors will have access to all of their money starting Monday, March 13th. No losses associated with the resolution of Silicon Valley Bank will be borne by the taxpayer. So there's a lot of needle threading in that. So yes, we're bailing out some of these folks. No, it's not your taxpayer dollars, but this is something that needs to be done. A lot of people say that it needs to be done, and others say, I think rightfully are pointing out the conversation that we're currently having around student debt loan forgiveness and the way that generally people are incredibly judgmental and reticent about people who took out money so they could go be a dentist, or a lawyer, or a teacher. So So you're right. So these are conversations that are happening in tandem. It does seem that like Silicon Valley Bank will not be any longer. So it's not like we are propping up the bank. Only the government is supporting the people who had money who are not able to take them out. Again, the last person on the phone tree, if you will.
Francesca, I was working in finance in 2007, 2008.
Fun.
And yeah, so I know. So this is the fun story time. So 2007 was like very bullish. The stock market was doing great. Everyone was like, stonks go up, even though there was some stuff that didn't quite make sense about why the stock market was doing so well. But I remember there was one day over the summer when we came to work and there was news that like some mutual bond fund or some like mortgage-backed securities fund had collapsed, and we were all like, oh, that's weird. It's like if you were getting married on a perfectly sunny day and you suddenly feel one big fat raindrop that comes out of nowhere.
Right.
Like, wonder what's gonna happen here. And then, for several months, everyone was like, nah, it's probably fine. It's probably fine. It's probably fine. And then everything went, there's all the words that I want to say to describe what happened are inappropriate to use on this show. Everything went bad. And I think, the government's response to this to really try to calm people down by making sure that, so the money that these people are going to get, these depositors are going to have made available to them is from an insurance fund, essentially. Every bank pays into an insurance fund. And normally if the bank fails, up to $250,000 per depositor is available to cover people. But because so many of the people who were invested in SVB or had deposits at SVB had more than $250,000, like Roku, I think had like $500 million in cash at SVB. That's a lot of money. Like that's a company ruining amount of money to not have available to you. And so what the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, what they all did was make more of that money available than normally would be available because they are terrified that this could ripple out to other small banks. Because one thing that SVB has in common with other small banks, and for other banks of all sizes, is that they had low risk bond investments that have lost value in the last couple of years as the Fed keeps bringing up interest rates. So, right now, I think the Fed, the Treasury Department, the FDIC are taking a look at a lot of small and mid-sized banks to make sure that their balance sheets are not anything to be concerned with. And here in LA on Saturday, I believe, there was a run on a different bank in Brentwood. I don't know if you saw social media of it, but there was a First Republic Bank in Brentwood that people were running to take all of their money out of. And that's the kind of thing that they're trying to stop, because the whole banking system collapses if every single person who deposited money into a bank wants all of their money out at the same time. And so right now what they're trying to do is say like, look, you don't need to do not go and take all your money out of the bank. The reason SVB failed is because too many people tried to take all of their money out of the bank at the same time, and the bank didn't have the cash. So now, they're like, please do not go to your bank and take all your money out, because if we all did that, everything would collapse. And that's catastrophic. That's a catastrophic outcome. So I think what they're doing is everything they possibly can with the resources available to them. The downside of this move is that fund that the FDIC is drawing from to protect the SVB depositors is now pretty depleted. So if it happens to too many other banks, we're gonna see some trouble.
Yeah. No, and again, let's just be real about the raising of the interest rates, right? Like, do you think that the people who can't afford homes because you've raised interest rates outside of the realm of possibility for them, are they gonna get any kind of bailout? Are they gonna get some assistance? No. This is what happens when you raise interest rates, and I guess the Fed didn't think about, business, right? But it's interesting the way when business, like sort of new tech startups, possible job creators, future Zuckerbergs who can, just gouge us for all we're worth and turn the internet into 1984. If they need help, they get the help. But so forgive me if I'm just still really pissed off that rising interest rates are terrible, but not necessarily for these fools, but clearly it was bad for this bank as well. But also for everyday people who are just trying to actually again, invest in a home or buy a home at some point. So anyway,
I hear you on that. I hear you so loud and clear on that, because that's something that like we're facing as a family right now. We're like, no, all right, well, never mind about that then.
Yep.
It's really frustrating to witness, but it's also like, I remember working in finance in 2008, and I wasn't like working in like, making tons of money finance. I was working a job so I would have insurance. It was like
as you do in this country.
Yeah, exactly. It was like literally the place that would hire me, and I was like an assistant, right? But like it was so scary because there are so many people that are employed at tech companies and employed at small to mid-sized banks that aren't like these, Mr. Monopoly guy running down the street with like bags with dollar signs on the side people. They're just like regular people who depend on the system to function for them. Right. Another thing that's kind of stuck in my craw about this is, the bank stock was tanking on Thursday and Friday, right? And on Friday we saw a couple other bank stock tank, like First Republic, like I mentioned. And what is happening as stocks tank is that it's possible for somebody to short a stock and profit when it's tanking. And there's something to me that seems completely insane about the idea that you can short a bank stock like this. Like, I think below a certain, and we're getting a little bit in the weeds here, but a bank that has below a certain amount of assets under management, it shouldn't be legal to short that stock.
Right. Like, well, and expand that to like the world. That's what, like, when you buy a country's debt for pennies on the dollar, you screw over an entire nation. That's happened, in this globalized world that we live in, under the IMF and the World Bank, et cetera. But I want to get into this, like, why, right? Why we're here really quickly. It's not too deep in the weeds. Elizabeth Warren has an op-ed in the New York Times, obviously, and because she has been sounding the alarm on, and she has been on effectively a lot of this bank deregulation. So she writes, in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, Congress passed the Dodd-Frank Act to protect consumers and ensure that big banks could never again take down the economy and destroy millions of lives. Wall Street chief executives and their armies of lawyers and lobbyists hated this law. They spent millions trying to defeat it, and when they lost, spent millions more trying to weaken it. But then Mr. Trump came to power. So Greg Becker, the chief executive of Silicon Valley Bank, was one of the many high-powered executives who lobbied Congress to weaken the law. In 2018, the big banks won with support from both parties. President Donald Trump signed a law to roll back critical parts of Dodd-Frank. Regulators, including the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, then made a bad situation worse, letting financial institutions load up on risk. So what she's saying is that Silicon Valley Bank, and a bank that purely runs on a lot of liquidity that is super risky, like these tech startups that don't actually, can't make good, aren't making back the money that they say that they need for their overheads or whatnot. Again, for apps that I'm sure we definitely need. That is a risky bank. That these banks should not be subject to so few regulations. And that's exactly what happened. You got the lobbyists in there, got into Trump's ear. Trump did exactly that and basically loosened regulations on these smaller, more precarious banks. Like, no one's saying Bank of America is safe or like is like benevolent or anything. But this would effectively be like, yeah, you can't start just like a random bank based on vibes, as Erin said. So Elizabeth Warren, of course, Senator Warren has been calling this out for a long time and clearly pointing everyone to the fact that we need regulations. I'm sorry, libertarians, but it's true. We have to take our first break, though. When we come back, maybe a little bit more on this and see what the right has to say about SVB going under. Don't go anywhere. All right, let's get into, of course, the right wing is going to have some kind of narrative about why Silicon Valley Bank went under. They can't just say it was because of a lack of regulations, which is the reason it went under. They can't blame business because, of course, we have to sacrifice our bodies and our families for big business to thrive. Instead, they're going with their fave. It was the wokeness of SVB that led to its downfall. So here's Stephen Miller. Oh, sorry, no, do we have a stop for this? Should we just jump into this? Yeah, take a look.
And then we see now coming out that they were one of the most woke banks in their quest for the ESG type policy and investing. This could be a trend, and there are consequences for bad Democrat policy. And I think we need to keep an eye on all the banking sector right now.
That's the chair of the House Oversight Committee in the United States government. Like he's saying it's the wokeness. So that's where we're at, people. We can, I think we can't hold our breath for any regulation if the head of the Oversight Committee is like, it's the wokeness. We'll look into why and who put that line out to begin with. But here's just a cast of ghouls who repeated this line. So Stephen Miller, remember him? Yeah, he emerged from his blanket fort to tweet, woke banks, woke law schools, woke airlines, woke hospitals, woke federal agencies, woke military, what could go wrong? Replace the word woke with deregulated, and I'm super on board with that. Yeah, like woke airlines? Is that why Southwest canceled millions of flights? Come on now. Donald Trump
nothing
Jr.
Nothing more woke than lobbying to have bank regulations loosened for years and then having Trump sign a law that does exactly that. It's extremely woke.
Exactly, very, very woke. Your dad is the wokest. His dad is, but he continued, here we go. I don't remember banks collapsing under Trump. You wouldn't, because he had to set them up, and then, then they get knocked down.
Also, amphetamines mess with your short and midterm memory. So I bet there's a lot he doesn't remember happening under Trump.
Also true. I don't remember my own name. I don't remember banks collapsing under Trump, but don't worry, guys. It's only a matter of time till Biden blames him. Sorry, I'm just gonna do my little impression. Has nothing to do with high interest rates, Fed rate hikes necessitated by record inflation caused by his out of control spending. Okay, so he's getting okay. He's trying to blame inflation, trying to blame the Democrat inflation. But then here's where he really gets to the crux of where the wokeness is coming from. Let's see if you can spot the woke, i.e. woman of color. SVB is what happens when you push a leftist woke ideology and have that take precedent over common sense business practices. This won't be the last failure of this nature so long as people are rewarded for pushing this BS. And this BS, it's a quote tweet where it's the head of the financial risk at SVB, Jay Ursapa, who discusses the importance of diversity in our global workforce and says that she felt privileged to co-chair the LGBTQ plus ERG and help spread awareness of lived queer experiences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is why she was too busy doing that, because we all know, Erin, that when banks set out to do diversity programs, like they really become less of a bank and more just like nothing but CRT. Like that's actually their goal. People get into banking so they can low key incept CRT into the public.
Yeah, no, banking is notoriously a really progressive place for sure. I remember being like, I was working at a bank during Occupy Wall Street, and I remember my coworkers being like, yes, queens. Yes, queens. No, that's ridiculous. First of all, it's word salad. Spoken by somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, but doesn't expect that anyone who listens to them knows what they're talking about. So they're just using kind of a bunch of buzzwords that don't even make any sense together. I'm honestly surprised that Donald Trump Jr. didn't seize on the word diversify, which is a really important thing when you work in finance or when you have a portfolio, and get mad about that. But yeah, he's a very stupid man who thinks, and probably rightfully so, that the people who look up to him, listen to him, are even stupider than he is. And he can dazzle them with a bunch of words that mean absolutely nothing.
That's so funny. That is exactly what they're going to do. They're going to be like, no, we just want invest in one area, one stock, the master stock.
Actually, diversification could have saved a lot of these people who deposited at Silicon Valley Bank. That's why you don't just put everything into one specific thing.
we try to forget that if we are the former vice president of the United States. They never chanted for my head. They definitely chanted for your head on January 6th. There are the insurrectionists. But Vice President Pence is clapping back. And he was speaking at the Gridiron Dinner, which is sort of an annual white tie dinner where I guess politicians are supposed to make fun of themselves and others. And hey, little Mr. Orthodox he's got some jokes, obviously all pre-approved by Mother. He's got some jokes, and he's got some sincere words. And so I don't think I've seen him call out the former president, his former boss, to this extent. But here he is at that dinner saying, quote, "President Trump was wrong. I had no right to overturn the election." Remember, they wanted the vice president to do that. "And his reckless words endangered my family and everyone at the Capitol that day. And I know that history will hold Donald Trump accountable." So I love that like these strong words also end in history will hold him accountable.
Somebody's gonna yell at that guy someday.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's gonna highlight that part in their textbook and be like, ooh. Ooh.
They're gonna highlight it so hard with so much anger. Yeah, this sort of, I mean, I don't know. It sort of reminds me of like writing a strongly worded letter to the editor after 9/11. Like that's, I mean, I appreciate the sentiment, but that's maybe not really gonna do much to fix anything.
No. No, and so okay, this is also a little bit of him talking back to the Tucker Carlson portrayal of January 6th as being visitors who, just had a bad lunch and kind of just, went haywire halfway through their visit to the Capitol building. But he says he went on at this dinner to say, "Make no mistake about it, what happened that day was a disgrace, and it mocks decency to portray it in any other way." But that's actually the tagline for the Tucker Carlson Tonight Show, mocking decency. Let's see, he says, "For as long as I live, I will never diminish the injuries sustained, the lives lost, or the heroism of law enforcement on that tragic day." So he's trying to carve himself out as someone who believes that January 6th was bad. Again, this is all probably positioning himself for a potential run at the presidency himself. But my favorite part of this speech is that Pence has got some jokes, guys. There's a few jokes now. I mean, you tell me what you think of them. We'll talk, we'll rate them. But he took some digs at Donald Trump himself. One of the things he said was that Trump wanted him to sing "Wind Beneath My Wings" at staff meetings because it made him feel better, something like this. Clearly, it wasn't a great joke, but here's a better joke. He said, "I read that some of those classified documents they found at Mar-a-Lago were actually stuck in the president's Bible, which proves he had absolutely no idea where they were."
That's pretty good. But
yeah.
You know what? I have seen a version of that on Twitter, and I've actually said a version of that joke where I'm like, if you want to hide something from a Republican, put it in a book, because they'll never look in it. I've seen versions of that joke before, though. I mean, I'm not saying I like came up with the idea of hiding something in a book, but yeah, I would say 6 out of 10.
Yeah. It's I mean, look, it's also a little, it's creepy because he's back here standing the Bible and doing it's like I don't know. There's only so many. I can't really laugh out loud at someone who's like, they should have just checked Luke chapter 10. That's not my cup of tea, but there was more. He actually mocked a little bit of himself in this. He tried his Trump impression. He said he really liked the passages about smiting and perishing of thine enemies. As he put it, Mike, there's some really good stuff in there. I guess people like that, the smiting and the perishing. This is after Pence, by the way, said that January 6th was bad. So we're also supportive. It's funny. Mm-hmm. The former president really loves the smiting, loves the perishing, big into the perishing.
I would say Mike Pence has authored some funnier stuff in the past than that joke. Remember his review of Mulan that he posted on the blog that went along with his radio show before he went into politics? Oh, yeah.
No, but yeah. I need to read this immediately.
I'm gonna text it to you after. I'm sure it's like archived somewhere, but it's very funny. He watched Mulan and he was not a fan and wrote a review of it. It was very funny.
It's incredible. Also, was he the person behind the Lodestar op-ed? I still want to know. Okay, then he pokes fun at himself. He says, "I'm not some kind of religious nut. Just ask my sons." Jediah, Obadiah, and Zechariah. It's true. I'm a man of deep faith. In fact, my preferred pronouns are thou and thine.
Okay, that's funny. I think that's like I think for him, I think that's pretty good.
Oh God, the preferred pronouns as a setup. I mean, the right loves that anything. My preferred pronouns, are gun and nut or whatever.
They don't make sense grammatically, but thou and thine actually, that's a way for the joke to work. True. Without it making fun of the existence of preferred pronouns. It makes fun of his religiosity instead of the fact that sometimes people don't use he or she pronouns. I don't know. I think it's an okay one.
Yeah. No, we'll give him that. I think he's finding his voice. I think he's got a few more years to go before he can sort of work out a full routine, tour the country a little bit, and he'll crush it. But look, this is at the same time, obviously, that he has asked a judge to block a grand jury subpoena for his testimony related to January 6th on the grounds that he is a coward. No, that he is protected by the Constitution's speech or debate clause. So I think he's found something maybe it was in the Bible. Maybe he doesn't really know. There's something protects him from having to actually speak anymore on January 6th. But look, we saw his entire team running for their lives effectively, scared as hell after finding out that, this mob was chanting for Mike Pence's head and that they wanted him specifically to act. Ron DeSantis has made some mistakes in the past. Just his, hanging out with 17-year-olds and buying them booze in Florida when you're their teacher. That could be one. Two, passing a bunch of anti-gay laws in your state and calling it, protecting children. But this one really stands out. Over the weekend, DeSantis was trolled to his face by this very sweet woman who handed him a beautiful snowflake to hold. And yet, if you zoom in on said snowflake, it says fascist. That's right. He got owned by Crafts, which I love. This just a doily, being owned by a doily is beautiful. And I love this woman. We don't really know who this woman is, but this is from Iowa Captive, a midlife misfit on Twitter says, my friend makes snowflakes to give to politicians who come to Iowa, and there are special messages for odious Republicans. Please look at the snowflake carefully. So this, I guess, friend of this woman in Iowa, again, this was in Iowa, I apologize. Of course, that is where many candidates for president announce their candidacy. So he was visiting Iowa, introducing himself to audiences of Republicans ahead of his 2024 bid, which he hasn't announced yet. But let's look at Iowa Republicans. Support for Trump among Iowa Republicans. This is June 2021 versus March 2023. It's gone down from 69% to 47%. Maybe DeSantis, despite holding the doily, is coming up on him. Let's go to this Des Moines Register. Donald Trump, former US president and candidate for Republican presidential nominee, his share versus Ron DeSantis is pretty neck and neck. So then we have Mike Pence is the third pie chart there, and number 4 is Nikki Haley. So there we have it. This is in Iowa. DeSantis 42, Trump 44%. I don't know.
Say a couple things about the snowflake. I want to go back to that really quick.
Please go back.
So if you see a cat face, she's here, she's ready to make her debut. So apologies in advance for people who don't want to see a cat while I'm talking. Okay, so here's the thing about Ron DeSantis. That snowflake, to me, it obviously says fascists on it. I don't know if I'm just I look for words and things, but that was the first thing I saw. So I don't know how Kim Reynolds, Ron DeSantis, other politicians who were handed the fascist snowflake didn't spot that right away. It seems very obvious. Also, in a state where their public university's mascot is the Hawkeyes, that doesn't play very well. Second of all, Ron DeSantis has lost a bunch of weight recently. And there's many reasons to speculate as to how or why. My personal favorite theory is Ozempic, the diabetes drug that is prescribed off-label to actresses to help them lose weight. But for whatever reason, it is an odd choice for a politician as his national star is rising to make himself sort of unrecognizable compared to how he used to look. I'm not sure that that's the right choice if he's trying to make an impression on people, especially at this phase in the possible 2024 election season, which, by the way, it's barely 2023. We're not even done with Q1 of 2023, right? I feel like I just need to get, I can't, no, I'm not thinking about
too early.
There's too many things that are gonna happen. There's too many things that are gonna change. Ron DeSantis could continue to evolve into a single vertical line and be totally unrecognizable. There could be more fashion snowflakes hanging out, whatever. There's so many things up in the air. I am kind of over Iowa's outsized influence on primary politics though. Especially because it's a state, if you take a look at it, like its population demographics, like everyone young and educated is leaving that state. It is like increasingly old, undereducated and conservative. And so it presents this almost like CPAC-like distortion.
Totally.
Yeah, so it's whatever. This is a deeply irritating story from many angles, but it's still important.
Yeah. No, look, the meatball Ron comments got to him. So yes, he's going to continue to just dissolve into a vertical line, as you said. I love that. And also this restored my faith that not everyone cool is leaving Iowa, and that woman for sure is one of them. She's holding the snowflake. And look, honestly, right wingers, they're such like thirsty grifters that they will take a photo with anyone who pretends to be their fans. All right, Janine Pirro took a photo with me because I said I was a fan, and then I should have put like little bunny ears or done something, but I put devil horns on her in post. It was fine. I got my photo.
Well, there's a journalist who goes out there and like pretends to be. She's like a pretty white lady, and she goes out and pretends to be like a super right-wing MAGA person. I think her name's Lauren Windsor, and she just gets them to say the wildest stuff to her just by being like, "Hey, it's me wearing a red hat.
Hi, blue eyes, red hat."
Exactly, asking
blonde.
Truly wild question and getting an answer, like truly wild answers. So I think you're onto something, Francesca. You pretend you're a fan, they'll pretty much take a picture with anything and tell you anything, as long as you're like, I like you, tell me stuff. I think
I have another family in a different state. Anyway, you take care. All right, we got to take our second break, but there's more news after this. All right, we got enough time just for this block of badness. So don't mess with Texas, guys, because they're messing with themselves enough. They've got enough of their own problems, self-imposed problems. And this week, it's just been a slew of disgusting policies. So the latest is that a man in Galveston is suing 3 women who allegedly helped his ex-wife obtain an abortion, specifically through abortion pills. The man is suing under the state's wrongful death statute. The lawsuit claims that assisting with a self-managed abortion qualifies as murder under the state law, which allows the man to file a wrongful death claim. Remember, Texas exempts the actual people who are getting the abortion, but anyone who helped them, even let's say an Uber driver to get to the appointment, or someone who, in this case, obtained abortion pills, could be sued under their vigilante law. Marcus Silva is the guy's name, claims in the civil lawsuit that his then wife learned she was pregnant with his child in July 2022 after the state's total ban took effect, and discussed with 2 women how to get abortion pills. The friends allegedly discussed Aid Access, a site that ships medication, abortion drugs from overseas, but they were able to get the pills in Houston, where 2 of the women live. The pregnant woman said, "I know either way he will use it against me." According to photos of a group text attached to the suit. "If I told him before, which I'm not, he would use it as a way to try and to stay with me. And after the fact, I know he will try to act like he has some right to the decision." Silva has asked the state court in Galveston for damages of more than $1 million, and also wants an injunction to stop the 3 women from distributing future abortion pills. But no one has been criminally charged yet. This, I mean, just overall reactions, Erin, to stories like this.
Well, we knew it was coming, right? There have been some lawsuits underneath that Texas law, SB 8. There have been a few, but they've all been kind of like troll lawsuits designed to just like test the law or make fun of the law. And this is the first, I think, real one that we're seeing. The woman who actually had the abortion is not being sued, which I found to be really interesting. He's just suing her friends, which is terrible. And it made me think, I feel like maybe a blue state like California should introduce something called a Goodbye Earl law. Are you familiar with that song by the Chicks, Goodbye Earl?
No, but I should be.
Yeah, so it's about these two best friends. And one of the friends is being abused by her husband. And so the other best friend flies into town and they decide that Earl has to die. And it's a nice little it's a real dance floor. It gets the dance floor going like at a wedding dance. I've been at a wedding dance where Goodbye Earl has played and everyone runs to the floor. But honestly, this Silva guy sounds like, outside of this lawsuit, he seems like a person who is acting in a way that I would consider abusive.
Yeah.
And like the state is essentially underwriting and endorsing and encouraging abusive men to be backed up by law. That, it's so messed up. It's not even that we don't care about the health of women. It's like we're actively empowering their abusers to go after their friends who are trying to help her receive medical care. Also, I want to say, if she was early enough in her pregnancy that abortion pills were an effective way for her to terminate her pregnancy, that's pretty early. That's that's before you're even 3 months pregnant, before you're showing, before anything. And the idea that he has claim over her body at that phase in the pregnancy or any real vested, it's just so top to bottom gross for me. From the abuse of this man was subjecting his former wife to the state's endorsement of that abuse, and to the fact that these women are being sued for $1 million. That's crazy.
Absolutely. No, this is, but he would have been a really hands-on dad, Erin. I'm sure he would have been a great father.
One of the main signs of a great dad is a person who tries to control the body of their wife.
Yeah.
That's
what I always say. No, that's exactly right. I mean, this is what Republicans are doing, and they want women to run into the hands and the abusive arms of their partners when they cannot have an abortion, when they cannot free themselves of a child that they don't want, right? That they maybe they weren't seeking. This is not even a kid, right? Just they don't want to be pregnant. And they definitely don't want to have their abuser's kid. So, and I'm not saying this, there's no evidence that this man was abusive, but you hear from what she said. She says, he's going to use this to try and stay with me.
That's abusive. That's abusive.
Right.
Reproductive coercion is a form of abuse.
Yes.
And
exactly.
I know we're trying to couch this and stuff, but I really think that we should expand our concept of what abuse looks like to include that, because that is straight up abusive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that again, the fact that Roe v. Wade has been effectively overturned is unearthing all of these ancient laws. I believe it's Indiana, but you correct me if I'm wrong, where basically you can't have an abortion if without the consent of your husband effectively. And so it keeps people married. So you can't simultaneously seek divorce and an abortion. Texas State Representative Matt Schaefer filed House Bill 20 on Friday, which proposes the creation of a Texas Border Protection Unit. What? Don't we already have one of those? No, this one is completely citizen run, equipped to arrest, detain, and deter individuals crossing the border illegally, including with the use of non-deadly force. Under the bill, the unit's selected chief would be allowed to employ law-abiding citizens without a felony conviction to participate in the unit, although the proposal states that citizens may not have arresting authority unless trained and specifically authorized by the governor. The bill also states that Texas Governor, currently Republican Greg Abbott, shall appoint a citizen of the United States as Border Protection's unit chief. The unit leader, as well as their self-appointed deputy and assistant chiefs, would also be entitled to an annual salary as provided by the legislature. okay, so you already have Customs and Border Patrol, which has incredible jurisdiction, and apparently that's not enough. And all of their abuses, which have been well documented by many human rights groups, as well as this show, that's not enough. Vigilante groups that self-organize, that's not enough. We need a sanctioned vigilante group from law-abiding citizens without felony convictions who just happen to like shooting at and around immigrants.
Just increase teacher pay, dude. Like, are they like, come on, what a waste of money. The idea that like any money could be used to compensate any of these individuals is ridiculous. First of all, it is classic government bloat from the party of small government. It's also just ridiculous. Like, in what world does this end well? In what world? Like, take a look at like, what's the best case scenario for everything working out? We've got a bunch of emboldened losers who want to be cops but can't even meet the very bare bones bottom of the barrel requirements to become cops, are allowed to sort of become cop juniors and act in ways using non-lethal force without much training. It's like, how are these people gonna be trained to make sure that the force they use is non-lethal? Like, what weapons are they going to be allowed to have? Like, a taser can be a lethal weapon if it's used by a person who lacks appropriate training.
Yes.
Or if it's used by a person with who just wants to inflict pain on somebody and has no regard for how to pull it back when it's time. It just seems like a huge waste of money. It asks way more questions than it answers. Like, how will any of this work? This seems like a really bad plan. And I think we've found a new job that attracts the worst kind of person in the world.
Customs and Border Patrol already attracts the worst people.
Exactly.
It has more, it's like the biggest federal agency, right? It has so much money. And Customs and Border Patrol realizes that they're ineffective. They have written under Trump, they wrote and they said, look, I feel like we're not very effective because a lot of people demonize us. They think that we're like bad. So maybe we should, this is ICE officials, by the way. Like, maybe we should actually take some money away from ICE, i.e. defund ICE and move it into other programs. Like, they have been saying this, that anyway, so that's, some of them know that they're terrible. The rest of them just kind of sit in their giant trucks all day long, their 4x4s, and wait for a mom with a child running away from a cartel violence in Central America so they can lock them up and demonize them and detain them. Just it's insane. So we already have those bodies if you want to go aggress upon undocumented immigrants. They exist there, sadly, but not enough for Greg Abbott.
For a second, can I put on a tinfoil hat for a second, Francesca?
Yeah, sure.
So this is also something, you mentioned that the federal government is the organization behind the Customs and Border Protection, right? There's already a federal program for this, but there's something, for me, this registers as Texas kind of power gridding law enforcement. And by that, I mean, they're setting up a redundant entity in a way to sort of eventually maybe move the federal government further out of Texas and allowing them to become even crueler and more awful to people who are just trying to come to this country and not, be subject to unimaginable violence. It seems like a way, to me, it seems like Texas is trying to sidestep the pretty out of control organizations that the federal government already has working down there. They're like, no, they're not out of control enough. We need to put our Texas spin on it and let these people have the same job that feds have.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that is all the time we have for this part of the show, but there's more show on YouTube, of course, and on Twitch. If you're watching on linear, this is it. But we will be back with more stories in the aftermath, so don't go anywhere.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.